In a career spanning 5 decades, Doris Kearns Goodwin has become one of America's most respected and acclaimed presidential historians and biographers. She received the 1995 Pulitzer Prize for History for No Ordinary Time, her profile of Franklin and Eleanor Roosevelt. Goodwin's 7th book, Leadership in Turbulent Times, explores the development and exercise of leadership through the lens of the presidencies of Abraham Lincoln, Theodore Roosevelt, Franklin Roosevelt, and Lyndon Baines Johnson. Goodwin discusses the book and the traditions and challenges of historic and contemporary leadership with author A. Scott Berg, whose own works include biographies of such historic figures as Charles Lindbergh and President Woodrow Wilson. Recorded at the University of Louisville, Kentucky Author Forum, this is Great Conversations, Doris Kearns Goodwin and A. Scott Berg.
Doris, old friend of many decades, it's good to be across the same desk.
Me too, you.
Yeah, good. Enough of the pleasantries. Let's put you to work.
Uh-oh.
Let's make you really work. Before we really get into it, though, your book is entitled Leadership in Turbulent Times. I think we should just define, I'd have you define, what leadership is, what you mean by that. Why did you put that in your title? What is this book about?
A very easy question. I think what drove me to want to write this book, even 5 years ago, before the turbulent times became more turbulent, was the feeling that something was broken in Washington and that we needed to figure out what genuine leadership was. So I took my 4 guys, as I like to call them, and I don't mean that to be undeferential. I just lived with them so long. It takes me, like it takes you, so many years to write these books, longer to write about World War II than the war to be fought, longer to write about the Civil War than that was to be fought. So I have to understand these guys and live with them, and they all led through crises times. And what that means is a challenge faced each one of them that required the leadership to mobilize the common energies of the people toward a cause, hopefully, that would be a greater good. So you've got Lincoln having to mobilize people to win the Civil War and to end slavery and to keep the war going. And then you have Teddy Roosevelt coming in when the Industrial Revolution had shaken up the economy even more than globalization and tech revolution have today, when the working class was feeling set off from the capitalists, when there was a feeling there might be a revolution that's going on. There's lots of immigration coming in from abroad. It sounds a little familiar. There's a gap between the rich and the poor. And of course, FDR coming in at the height of the Depression, when he wasn't even sure that the House of Cards would not collapse before he became president. And LBJ coming in with the assassination of JFK and the worry that, is there a conspiracy? What's happening to us as we're watching in real time the killing of JFK and then of Lee Harvey Oswald? So that's the definition of turbulent times. And it is usually a time, as Abigail Adams said, when great necessities create great virtues, that when you've got a crisis, it's somewhat easier to mobilize the country together. And they did, and then it turns out, I just keep writing and writing, taking so long, and we encountered an even more turbulent time. Not really. These were worse times. I promise people these are the worst times.
Do you promise?
I really do. I mean, people keep asking me on the street, are these the worst of times? As if as an historian I'm going to have an answer. But I think it's... No, but I think it's really important to know that America has weathered really difficult times before. And while we're feeling right now the loss of norms and loss of traditions and unclear where we're going, that the combination of having the right leader there at the right time, but more importantly, the citizens were active in each one of those times. That's the message for all of us. The anti-slavery movement, as Lincoln said, did it all. It wasn't just his leadership. It was the progressive movement that underlay both FDR and Teddy Roosevelt, and of course the civil rights movement for Lyndon Johnson. So the answer to all of us is it's up to us to figure this out. And we've done it before, and I know we're going to do it again.
And the basic system works.
It has worked, and it will work. I mean, it's not just being an optimist. This country, we have to believe in it. We have to know it. We can make it work. Unless you see it working before, that's my hope for the book. That when people read this, they'll feel perspective, they'll feel hope, and they'll feel if these people, our ancestors, went through these difficult times, our generation can do it too.